Welcome to the Infinite Musician Podcast. I'm Dan Weiss, creator and owner of MFile Music Theory and Songwriting. We are all about helping you gain control of your creative passion and power so you can become the musician you are supposed to be, making the most impact with your music by creating the music that you hear in your head.
I'm good.
All right, here it is. We are being joined with the lovely and talented and vivacious and multi-instrumentaled Chris Bruder, whom I don't know that friend is a good enough word for it. We've definitely familyed years and years ago.
4 years and years.
Yeah, this is a really nice reunion of musical minds here. I'm really glad you're taking the time out to come and chat with me here.
Stoked. Very happy to.
So I mean, you've probably been trying to keep busy somehow before, like, gigs have been kind of slowly trickling back. Like, besides Zelda, what have you been doing?
You know me too well. I've been trying to stay productive. I've been teaching music over Zoom, which, you know, is something. But it's weird going to nothing. Even jams, that only started happening kind of recently. So it was months of no music whatsoever. And it's weird because, like, you know, you'd think, oh, awesome, I have all this time to practice, but nope, doesn't work that way for whatever reason. When you're feeling down and when you're not seeing your friends and you're not jamming, you don't really feel like playing an instrument, even though you know deep down it's going to make you feel better. But
yeah, it's funny how being busy can kind of affect your practice motivation, because if you have to slot it in, then there's an urgency to kind of get it in. Oh yeah. Because it's important, right? But if there's nothing to do, it can always be put off.
Yep.
I'll do it later. I don't feel like it. And then it's like, so like a big thing, this may shock and alarm you, but like I've been getting up at 6 a.m. and just like sneaking into the office to just practice and warm up and play a bit and just like try and do a bit of writing or whatever, just so that's like the first thing that gets done in the day. And then whatever work-wise gets done is good, but I feel like it's like I've got that most important thing that could be potentially sidetracked like so easily.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I find it comes in waves. Right. Like if you're feeling like, you know what, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock today and practice, then by God, you do it. You know, I found that like, I go through phases where I'm like, I'm going to do all this. I'm going to write this crazy thing. And then there are periods of time where like, I feel like I'm kind of coming out of a period of one of the not busy times, because I'm feeling the itch to do a lot more things now, which is nice. But yeah, it does come in waves. And I think you need to, as artists, we need to be easier on ourselves when we're in this part of the wave. Right. Yeah,
it does. And trying to create like the best, system structure or process for being musical so that it takes any of the obstacles out of the way, because you don't want to make it harder on yourself than it already is, right? But like for me, with a baby who's like now walking and destroying everything, and he just is like running around and screaming, and if he gets in here, he's trying to hit all the keys on the keyboard and like, oh, what's this? I'll play with this like $500 mixer. This looks cool. And it's like, oh my God, he's trying to shove a cracker in there. Yeah. But it's like, so I keep him out as much as possible, but that's one big reason for like getting up super early. Yeah. Right. So he's still sleeping. I get it done. And then I can hang out with him whenever. But having like a really organized space where everything is out and you can just get it, you know, that's like been a big part of just being able to just be musical. Like, I need this. I'll grab this. This is here. It's already set up. Like, I don't have to spend 15 minutes of my precious music time trying to run cables to something or whatever. And
It's like what I always tell when I'm like teaching guitar. I'm like, don't put it in your case. And, you know, guitar technicians will say that's awful. But if I put my guitar in my case, I'm 3 times less likely to pick it up and play it for no reason.
Yeah. You know, psychologically, you see
I got to do the thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's like I'm walking by, I'm about to make a sandwich and I'm like, I want to play a G chord.
Yeah.
You know, like, I want to play something cool. I want to play.
Yeah. These guitar hangers are probably one of the best investments that I've made in a long time.
Absolutely. This tiny one right here is for my mandolin. And that's in its case, but that's because I brought it somewhere.
Yeah. I love, I just did the interview with Chelsea McBride yesterday.
Cool.
And we were talking about when you guys went on the tour with Socialist Night School. She was like, you know, it was crazy having to organize all these musicians, but you know, we didn't lose anybody. And I just kind of had this thought. I was like, you know, if you were going to leave anybody behind, it would probably be Bruder.
Wait, you meant we're leaving at 8 a.m.?
Just like standing in a field, like playing the mandolin, and there's all these butterflies like floating around.
Hey, wasn't I supposed to do something? Yeah, that was a good time. And Chelsea does such a great job at, as we say, herding cats and just getting 20 creatives on the same page, and not only to be there at the same time, but also to work towards something and at a really high level too. And, you know, you'd think that she'd have to be a hard ass about it, but she actually doesn't even need to, even though she has it in her. She can if she needs to, but she's got her shit so together that when you show up, you want to have your shit together. So it's like a lead by example kind of thing. So it's a great band to be a part of. Happy to be your, you know, friend and musical, you know, person.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, that group, because she was saying like there's so much diversity. It's all over the spectrum, but everybody's come together in such a passionate way about specifically like the project. Like everyone wants that kind of like, you know, so you were a participant on that end, but you've also had to put together large scale projects like that, like for your final for Humber. That was an incredible project. Yeah. I was very lucky to be able to be in the audience and see that, where you wrote like a whole sweeping movement and telling a story with music. And it was how many pieces was that band?
That was 9 horns and then piano, bass, drums.
Yeah. That's, I mean, not as big band, but like anything that scale, it gets very complicated very fast, and trying to organize that kind of, you know, would you say that like having experience in one band helps you to manage the other, or having managed a band helps you to kind of be more productive? Like does it work both ways in that kind of way? Absolutely.
I think everything you do builds on what you've done last, and you don't even really realize it necessarily. Like, you know, I started playing with a group of guys back when I first started music school. And actually you offered us our first gig. And, and
Squalloween, like, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Squalloween. Yeah. The Altabiles and Post Downpour Squalling. Great show. And so I feel like so much of what I've been able to do has kind of come from just playing music with friends like that. And then, you know, because that happened, I was offered this and everything just kind of grows. And so, yeah, as far as like writing for large ensemble music, there's a lot of things that go into that. Like, you know, I've played in large ensembles, and so you get the vibe of you know, what you want to do. I think generally you just want to fully immerse yourself in anything you want to write. So if I'm writing for a large ensemble, I'm listening to that stuff nonstop. Like it's for large ensembles, my go-tos are Maria Schneider and the Dave McMurdo Jazz Orchestra, which is like our hometown boys, but like world-class music. I
just got chills remembering that night. It was like the celebration after Dave passed away, and Mike took up the mantle of leading the band, and we all hopped in the car and drove to the Rex, and it was just like, you know, people in tears kind of thing. It was very like emotional, and they were playing all these tunes, and And I just had chills thinking about that when you brought that up. That was a good
and
time.
I remember it being so hot and sweaty in there, and I swear I heard Dave's voice when people were talking over a bass solo. Shut up, you dicks! Just like, yeah, Dave.
He was a really, really good teacher. You were in the third year jazz harmony with me, right? When we did,
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cause you were there for Takedown Move, right? Yeah. But it was a really awesome experience because usually, in jazz harmony previous, it was a lot of like textbook, let's learn, here's the rules. And then there's this. And then by third year, it was very free form talking about like, here's a specific song type. Let's kind of analyze it a bit and see what you can come up with in that style. Mm-hmm. That was a really, really cool kind of way to approach it. We were talking about like having constraints in songwriting, how it can kind of open up creative pathways for you and stuff. And before that, it was very project. Here's an assignment, write a tune. It's got to do this, whatever. If it turns out good, cool, you did a good job. And if it doesn't, it's still kind of just an assignment. But
I think
third year was a big one for that because it was a lot more open and very creative. And it was awesome to kind of have that experience. I really, really enjoyed that.
Well, I always tell my students, you gotta learn the rules and then break them. Like you don't deserve to break them until you've learned them. And that's sort of, first and second year, these are the pillars of, music and theory and songwriting and whatever. And then I was grateful. Yeah. You get to third year and it's like, okay, now go. And it's like, it's nice because then you're faced with the blank page, which is probably the hardest thing that any artist looks at. And then you learn tricks like working within a box, like you were just talking about. Like that's so huge for me because if I'm just staring at a blank page or like a keyboard and I just, I'm like, I want to write something good. It's so hard to do that. Whether like, so if I say, okay, I want to write a song that's kind of like this song, then that's a box I've put myself into. And then that song will probably end up sounding nothing like that other song. Yeah. But it's inspired by, and it allowed me to choose the option that I thought was more like the thing that I was going for. Mm-hmm. And actually talk about third year. I remember Pat Collins, one of our professors, amazing Canadian bass player. He asked us all to write 30-minute tunes. And that doesn't mean write a song that's 30 minutes long. It means you have 30 minutes to write a tune. And this is just like, you don't have to write lyrics or anything. It's just like, 8, 16 bars, pick some chords, throw a melody over it. But the idea is that if you only have 30 minutes to write a song, you have to go with your first idea. You don't have the luxury of self-doubt and like doubting an idea. Right. And so what it ends up doing, it's like a training ground for taking that first idea that's not very good. Maybe it is, but generally that's the idea that you're like, eh. Yeah. But over the course of the next few minutes, if you have to commit to that, your musicality is going to turn that into something cool. Right. And it's going to be pretty cool. So I remember we did a couple 30-minute tunes, and then the next week he's like, okay, write a 15-minute tune. And we're like, that's impossible. And I think I just wrote like 8 bars and then put a little melody over it. And I still bring that song to gigs to this day. It's one of my favorites. And people who like musicians who I play with, it's like a little simple tune called Banana Muffins. And everybody seems to love it. It's a nice little thing because it's just, I never would have, and it took 15 minutes to write. I think because I wrote it out, I gave myself 20. But yeah, it's a very valuable thing to learn. So I'd encourage anybody to just try putting, that's an easy box to put yourself in, is a time constraint. Yeah. And so whether that's choose 4 bars and put a little melody over it. But the idea is to not judge your first idea and just to work with your first idea and turn that into something cool, which is actually really interesting.
Because a big thing in a lot of just like ask comment like ladders or whatever, where I just throw out questions and stuff and trying to figure out like, what do people have trouble with their songwriting, and finishing songs is probably one of the biggest ones that comes up. And so, the idea of like, let's work on this, let's try this, let's try and do this, but like a time constraint. Like obviously we, when it was school, we had that because it was a deadline, giving yourself a deadline, but like being like, okay, you're going to sit down and you're going to have 30 minutes. Like, fuck, I got to start doing that. That's actually really smart.
Honestly, it's unreal. It's super cool.
Because it makes you flex your musical and your composer muscle, really.
Well,
because it's
more than flex, it allows you to trust it. That's
a
big thing. Because it's, and maybe it's just me, but I don't think so. Like I'll have like 20 ideas before I have one that I like. Whereas if I just practice taking that first idea and just sitting with it for 5 minutes, playing around with it, it'll morph into something cool. Like we're musicians for a reason. Like we play music, and we won't settle for something that sucks.
Music into, get music out of anything. You know?
For sure.
I had a song that I wrote, and the rhythm came from when I was walking, and the keys in my pocket and the zippers jangling. It ended up being like in 7/8, like against like the walking. So there was like a 4/4, but then there was like a 7 against it or something like that. And I remember like writing something for it, and was like, that music is everywhere if you know where to find it. You know, so it's like, that's a really strong point to actually bring out of this, is that trusting and being able to like, there's no bad ideas. Is such a big
just ideas that need a little more love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just as an offshoot, I don't know if anybody listening to this is wanting to play odd time signatures, but the bona fide way to learn how to play odd time signatures is to use your feet. Left, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh,
7,
yeah.
1, 2. And just as you're walking somewhere, just be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. And if you can feel an odd time signature over that, like your feet are 4/4, then you can play over the bar lines. You can play around with odd time signatures. That is the bona fide way to get good at odd time signatures.
Yeah, that's so funny that you said that. I kind of would unconsciously do that when I was distance running. I used to run like long distance and like cross country, and keeping a solid rhythm of my pace wouldn't always like be in 4/4 with my breathing. So it's like having that going at the same time and being like, I gotta get this next guy, I gotta beat him, but like my breathing needs to stay pretty solid and keep my heart rate at a reasonable level so I don't pass out. But yeah, I that's funny that you brought that up. It just kind of memory kicked off the shelf there.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, you've been playing for probably most of your life, right? Like you were playing, you were in bands in high school, but were you playing instruments before then, or were you just kind of picking up
so I started playing piano when I was 5, and probably guitar like when high school hit, like grade 8 or grade 9 probably.
The guitar age.
Totally. And I stopped playing piano, all but stopped playing piano in high school, and just played the guitar. And I'm grateful for it, even though I'm, maybe 4 years behind where I would be on piano, but it's so great having another instrument. And I tell that to my students too. I say, pick up another instrument. 'Cause like, we say I'm their piano teacher. I'm like, you have to practice, 'cause I'm coming here every week. But so like, it's almost like, when you're really focused on an instrument, it's almost not your hobby anymore. It's like something deeper, especially when you start to be a professional and have to put like, your livelihood in that camp. Then it's not really a hobby anymore. But having another instrument that you don't put those pressures on allows music to still be a hobby, which is wonderful.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I remember a really weird introspective moment while after partying with Bright Light Social Hour, which was that was such a great show. And they came and hung out with us late into the evening, and a couple of good old boys from Texas, and we're showing them a good time in Hamilton, Ontario.
Yeah.
And Jack, he was talking about how like they've been working so hard, and music had become such a job. Like it was just, you show up, you play the show, and that was it. That was all it was. And he was like kind of amazed that he's like, you guys just played a crazy show. You played your faces off, and what do? You come back here and you're still all playing music and all jamming.
Beatles all together,
Yeah. And it was like a weird kind of like,
I think that was an aha moment for him. I think it was like, you could see that like he was really in the trenches of like a tour and like a band, and like
they're a hard working band.
Yeah.
They do not stop. It's crazy.
And it's easy to lose sight of that when you're really focusing on something. And it's good though, because you need to have those focus moments. Like in order to improve on an instrument or to get a band off the ground, like you need to really do that. But it's nice to know that music's there for you to just have sing-alongs with your friends. And if your friends don't like sing-alongs, get new friends.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a bit of a revolving door on people who weren't quite on the inside yet. When we were all hanging out and partying, and it was like we would jam before the show, we would play at the show, and then we come back and play a show after the show. And it was just always music. And there'd be people that would come and be like, is this it? Like, you guys are all just playing music? We're going to go.
And that's cool, because they've got their own things. I'm sure they do. But for us, there's just that one way. And so the people that stayed forever.
Yeah. It was because there was always that one person you could see like being let out, and they're like, but I want.
Yeah. And it wasn't always like electric instruments. It was often acoustic instruments where everybody could sing along too. Like, and tell me you don't know the lyrics to Obla Di Obla Da, or like na 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 na.
Yeah. And if you don't,
everybody knows those lyrics.
It's like 3 a.m. and everyone's pretty hammered. Like, just go with it.
Yeah.
And it was a letting loose, which I think was like a really big part of the community that was around the band and the music. Like, it was very intertwined.
Yeah.
All things were kind of one.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, here's the people and they play music and whatever. Everyone was very much a part of it, whether they played instruments or not. And they were happy to be there because it was like, just like a pillar of energy, just always flowing, and always like creativity and positivity and just having fun. Like, there's so many after party pictures where it's just us with the biggest smiles on our faces. Well, probably for some other reasons, but like,
but mainly for the music and the people.
Joy.
You know what I mean? And that's why, like, after party, sure, people are drinking, but like, it was never about that. Like, honestly, it kind of took the role of like church in our lives.
It did.
We would come together for community and to take part in something that was bigger than us, which was, making music together. And like, just singing, whether you're good at it or not, just moving air through your throat hole with intention, it just lifts your soul up. And I remember, I still do whenever I make music with friends, whether it's in a rehearsal or just like with whoever, like singing a Beatles tune or whatever, you feel full, and that's one thing that I've realized going without it for so long. Everything was a little bit gray for lots of reasons. It's a weird time right now, but I remember when I started jamming again and, getting together with people again, not a whole lot of people, but, I have like, I see the band now and I see a few other people and so we sing songs and it's just like, oh, right. Like, the world's a little brighter now. It's, and that's one thing that, it's easy to take for granted when you're a musician, but like something that like we have at our disposal at all times.
Yeah. It's a really, it's like a gift, a power, a tool. Like, it's all these things kind of wrapped into one, because it's like, you don't have to be good at it to have it make you feel good.
Yeah.
And again, if you do it enough, you get better at it, right? Like, it's like, if you want to sing, you can sing. Like, you just focus on it and do it. And it's such a it's weird, like the healing power of like singing and stuff. Like
I've been
and for everyone involved. And
yeah, I've been sick with the flu, played an inspired set of music with great musicians, and the flu was gone by the end of that set. And I'm like not bullshitting you. It's happened a couple times, like body aches, chills, like I shouldn't have come to this gig. And then it's like gone, and sometimes for good. I use this
a couple times.
Yeah. It's like, wow, okay, that is some sort of magic. And it just the way it reacts with your body and your mind and your soul, it lifts you up and it makes you stronger. And I remember I use this analogy quite a lot, but it's, if you go to, like a tribe in Central Africa or, somewhere outside of Western culture, the whole idea is everybody sings and dances. And so you go there and you're like, oh, I'm not a singer. I'm not a dancer. They're like, sorry, like, yeah. What do you mean you're not
aren't you alive?
Yeah. And so it's not this delineation of musician and non-musician. And I guess it's easier for musicians to say, no, we're the same. But like, it really is. If like you are in an audience and you are like in the moment and hanging on every note, like the musicians are, there's really not a whole lot of difference between participating as a musician and participating as an audience member if you are locked in with that. And so that's why like you can be an audience member in a show and still come away from that feeling the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's been many a show that whether I was on stage or whether I was in the audience, just walking away feeling like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like, that was so good. Yeah. And it's like an exorcism or a spring cleaning for the soul, Absolutely. Like Horton Ports was the idea behind it. It was a very silly, made up word, but I decided to turn my birthday into a big psychedelic holiday. And because it's at the end of March, we've all been through a brutal gray Canadian winter and we needed a really good spring pick-me-up. Mm-hmm. So there was some kind of big party or a concert and everybody just get crazy and be as crazy as you want. And it was like a shake out the cobwebs and get the demons out kind of thing. And
I remember the very first Horton Ports, there was a collection of us that just, because it was just a funny word. I mean, you're the mayor of funny words, but that was one of the funny. And so you're like, I'm gonna like throw my birthday party. And it's gonna be Horton Ports. And so I remember around the school always just be like, Horton Ports. And I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And then eventually it just grew. And then eventually the posters went up and everybody's like, oh, Horton Ports. And then it became this massive event. God, I miss massive events. But it was a truly wonderful night. And then it's taken on so many different iterations over the years. But people need an excuse people are always looking for excuses to have a good time and to do that.
It's true. I was getting into marketing before I really knew it with stuff like that, because like it was the mystique. It was something so silly. And like, I had people straight up like, there was one kid whose locker was near me and he was a bit of a dink. And I was asking him, I was like, have you got your tickets yet? And he's like, I'm not going to that. And then on the day of, he was like, do you have any tickets left? Like, the last two, man, like.
Nice.
But that's it. Like, you don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
And then you go and you're just like, this is fucking crazy. Yeah. They're shaving their mustaches on stage. Like, what is this?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the event. It's the experience. I mean, there is the musical part of it, obviously, that's playing music, but what is it that you're going to do that's going to separate them from just sitting at home and listening to the record, right? It's like, I went and created a memory. That's a really important part of like the show and the entertainment. And, there's debate on how much it can go in one way or the other with people like Kiss or like Lady Gaga or whatever, but it doesn't take the fact away that like the performance is still an art in itself, and I think there's a really good marriage of that has to be accomplished.
And people in the audience, in any audience, they are just waiting to be told how much fun they're supposed to be having. Like, honestly, like sometimes it's a somber mood and sometimes that's great for a show, but like the band sets the tone for the show. So the audience came to experience something, and then it's really up to the performers of like what the vibe is. So, you know, if you're having an absolute blast, that's infectious. That sets the tone for the audience. Okay, this is how much fun we're supposed to be having. Cool. Let's light it up.
It gives them permission.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like you play a song or whatever, and then the go-to line, like you ask them if they're having a good time. Yeah. And they're like, yeah. And it's never good enough.
Never good enough.
Never be satisfied. That they can always
at first
do better.
one, you're like offended at you're like, excuse me. Like, I thought this is, the classic Dan Weiss. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was a library.
Oh yeah. I miss being on stage because, as much as I like to be like curled up in a ball, being anxious about the world, making a complete spectacle out of myself is just something I really enjoy. It's like when you hear that Sacha Baron Cohen considers himself a private person. But it's because he's in character. Yeah. Right? He goes and he does these crazy things, but it's a character. It's not him. Yeah. And there's this separation. And
well, yeah, you definitely had a stage persona, and you definitely knew how to work a crowd. Like, we would play shows, like crazy shows, and to like a lot of wild, crazy people. And then it just became a thing where you knew that was going to be the vibe of the show. And so I'm thinking particularly of our run at the Baltimore House for those few years, performing every month or two. And just a sea of people, and just like, I still have people like, you know, I'll know them for like, you know, a couple months, and then I'll kind of bring up the band or whatever, and they're like, "You're in that band? I saw that band at Baltimore House, and that was the craziest night I've had," you know?
And that was like
again, that's not like, that's us doing our job, but it's so much bigger than just what we're doing, right? It becomes this collective of, you know, people taking part as the audience, you know? And, you know, we could be doing that to nobody, and it's no big deal. It's really less about what we're doing and more just about like watching a wonderful movement start to happen of like-minded people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were really, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we were doing in the rebuilding the foundations of the band and starting to work on the album, like I'm trying to learn or rebuild and teach those lessons that we were doing about what we were doing right, about like trying to have a focus, trying to define like the values, like what's our mission? Yeah. You know, our mission was to be like, okay, like when you listen to this, you're just going to feel good and want to party and want to be like, I want to be there. And if I can't be there, I want to start something here. You know, that was kind of like the vibe. Yeah. And that was like the guiding principle. And like we had so many meetings, like me and you, we'd go to the judge and we'd have our notebooks and a couple beers and just be like, okay, so what do we want people to feel? What do we want people to think? Who is the exact person that we're speaking to? And that was probably one of the most important things that we did without really realizing it.
Well, that album we made, Weaponized Magic, I view it as such a win. I probably hadn't listened to it for like a couple years, and Jordan just put it on the car and we listened to it twice, and I was like, holy shit. Like it was such a win because we had an intention, we had a creative vision, and then we realized it. Like that album was exactly what we wanted it to be. It was a balls to the wall rock and roll album, of course, with lots of other influences that naturally come through our songwriting. But it's such a snapshot in time of a scene, and like it's sort of a concept album. And I just like, I am to this day still so proud of that album.
Absolutely. There was no compromise. Yeah. I don't feel like there was any point where it was like, we'll just let it go, whatever. Like we really tried to hone in the details and get exactly what it was that we wanted.
Yeah.
And that was so much easier to do because we had a vision, we had an end goal, and trying to be like. One of the
things that helped us, I think, were having a team that keeps us accountable. Because I know me personally, I will do whatever for somebody else and I'll go above and beyond for somebody else, but for whatever reason I will not do it for myself. So having people to keep you accountable, people with common goals, regular meetings, all that stuff, but also assembling the right team. We got a producer and engineer kind of combo that like would stay up with us all night and like record stuff and like really understood the vision we were going for. And that's why, cause I mean, you can have a million great intentions and you can, write amazing songs and the album still falls flat. If the people on the other side making the album, like your producers and engineers and all that, aren't sharing in that same vision of yours,
Yeah. It's so many stories of, like conflict in that kind of way where it's like the album has a producer that the record label just sends in.
Yeah.
They're like, take care of this. You run the show, even though it's this band that's already made albums. And what a sad state to be in, like to not have control.
Yeah. The producer's only job is to realize the artist's creative vision. That's it. And so like the idea is that the producer's there to bridge the gap between the technical album making process and the songwriting, whatever, of the band into like this streamlined thing. And if a producer has another thing in mind than the band's creative vision, the first thing is the producer helps the band realize their creative vision as far as like actually figuring out what it is, and then realizing the creative vision as in like making it real. So it's, the right team will make or break the album.
Absolutely. Having Josh Hanf and Phil Spencer, they put so much of their extra time in to like drive down from Toronto and come and meet with us and talk with the whole band. And we would spout out ideas. We would talk about inspiration. And that really was like, set up a lot of the technical aspects, like where should we record it? What has the best kind of console for this, or the best kind of equipment? What are we going to need? And it was a really helpful thing to have, because I mean, this was the biggest album project that we had done up to that point.
Yeah.
And we needed some guidance on that, even though we were like, we've been in the studio a couple times before, like it's probably fine.
And also like we didn't like out of the gate have a creative vision for this album, because like we're all jazz school nerds, but we all love prog and we all love video game music and we all love whatever, but in our hearts is rock and roll, so like at the end of it took us a while to realize exactly what we wanted, and we wanted all these songs, whether they were traditionally rock and roll songs or not, to have that sort of spirit and vibe. And so that took a long time of conversations and whatever to really hone in on it. It can be really hard working with other people. We were blessed that we had a group of like-minded individuals, and that makes it easier. And in some respects, having a dictator makes it easier too, but then it all falls on one person's shoulders, and I'm not sure I'm cut out for that.
You took a lot of that process on, and like,
I was able to lean on the group, right? It was, I maybe took like project manager role for a lot of that. But it was certainly not, a me thing. It was all of us putting, lots of time and energy and money, and it wasn't all roses. I mean, we were at each other's throats a few times,
Oh yeah,
but all over like we're going for the same goal, right? Like, I think this song will be better if we do this. I think this song will be better if we do this. And I think the process that we would always go by and still always will is, try it one way, try it the other, take a vote. And like, it's gotten to the point where like, I'm very happy to be wrong now. Like I will always play devil's advocate, then we'll try it both ways. And I'm like, cool. Now I know. Like,
at least
Yeah.
So you had a pretty big hand in the production process of like your own album. I kind of want to talk a bit about producing the Infernal Machine, because doing that project was kind of a precursor to, okay, I think we can really do this with our album, right? You guys were still in school. For those that don't know, it was Earth's Yellow Sun, prog metal with horns.
Yeah.
And these guys are just insanely talented musicians, but that was a big school project at the end of the year, right? You helped produce and arrange and all that shit. And just kind of talk a bit about that process. Cause
one of my best buddies and my producing partner, Josh Hamp, who helped with Weaponized Magic, his metal band, Earth's Yellow Sun, his vision was always to, metal's bigger than screamo. Metal's bigger. Like it's such an artistic and awesome way to create music. And so his idea was this 20-minute epic EP, 5 movements, all instrumental, that told a story. So what my job was as a producer was to help him realize that creative vision. So we were story writing as much as we were music writing. And so the idea was, the story was about a futuristic society that builds a giant robot. And over the course of the 5 movements, eventually the robot turns on humanity, and then there's a big war. And we thought, okay, how can we tell this story through music? And the idea was the metal instruments would represent technology, or the robot, whatever you want to call it. And then acoustic instruments would represent humanity. So we had acoustic fiddle leads, acoustic piano. We had a master tabla player come in. There was an 8-voice choir that I arranged, a 5-piece horn section, all on this metal record. And it just turned out to be one of the things that I'm most proud of. My job for that, it took about a year of my life, and it was like a 25-minute EP. And once you listen to it, it's dense and crazy. And every single little part, every single riff was justified by the story. So talk about working inside of a box. That allowed us to really choose what was going to happen. And so now, because we have every little riff tells a story, there's a comic book on its way. It's almost done. It's been in the works for a long time.
Man, that's been such a long time coming.
It's expensive. And so my job wasn't necessarily to write the riffs. That was Josh's job. Mine was to say, okay, we need a riff here that, says, the robot's retreating and coming back later, right? So it was 5 movements. The first one is the building of the robot, which has this big triumphant ending. And then the second one is when the robot goes out and does all the people's bidding. The third one, betrayal, where the robot realizes, oh no, these humans are the enemy. Number 4 is a beautiful acoustic calm before the storm. And movement 5 is the war between robot and humanity. So you can imagine it's a literal war between acoustic instruments and electric instruments. And so my role wasn't in the principal writing, but my role was I did a lot of arranging for like the horns and the choir and stuff, and wrote some melodies and wrote some shreds and stuff. But that was a cool project. Go listen.
So that's a really important distinction that you made, where it's like there was the principal writer, and your job was to kind of pull things out or kind of guide them in a certain direction. Because I think, you've made a lot of like really declarative statements about like, this is what a producer's job really should be. And whether that's you as the artist or somebody else, it's something that really does need to happen in the writing process to kind of bring more out. And I almost feel like that's something that's kind of skipped over a lot of times when you talk about like writing music and composition. It's one person sitting in the room with a piano or a guitar, and then the song's finished and they're like, okay, cool, I'm done. And there's almost like a, production can be from like a revision standpoint. It can be like, reworking something or remixing something so that it's like updated. If you wrote a song 10 years ago or something and you go back, and being able to have those skills in mind to be like, I know more, I can clean this up a bit better. And I think that's a really important kind of musical hat that doesn't always get pulled off the shelf, because it's almost like people don't really know that it's there, or like what the goal is.
Yeah, what
almost
exactly
like mastering.
Just about to bring that up.
The mystery of what is mastering? I don't know, but it's expensive, so we better do it. And it's like, that's true. Like, you better do it. But I'm actually kind of figuring out, if you can believe it.
What mastering is?
Yeah. I can't tell you on recording, or they'll kill me. They'll kill my whole family if I tell anybody what mastering is.
Well, what I always tell people about mastering is it's like laminating your recording so that it sounds the same on every set of speakers. Yes. Essentially, just two things. It's and I mean, I might be talking out my ass right now as a piano player, but it's generally EQ. So like if one song is like super bassy, it just kind of like puts it back up there, and then peak limiting so that if any part is like really loud, it'll just keep it kind of on the same level. And it takes really incredible ears and really great gear to do it well. Yeah. And so that can sort of make or break your recording too. And it sucks because like I kind of know what it is, but I'm not good at like judging a good master, versus a bad master. It's you got to put your trust in somebody, unless you're a total audiophile and can tell yourself.
I sat and watched Ruben Ghost just like do the whole album, and I have no idea what happened. I watched. I know it sounded good. It sounded really good. I'm not sure what he had. He might have had something, because it was like an actual console. Like, he wasn't working with, he might have had something similar to like what they have in those like Abbey Road plugins that I use. They're really sick, but like, it looks familiar. Like, the console was just like all these really old school looking knobs and like meters and everything. And I was just staring at it like, did you get this from an alien crash? Like, what is this? Like, I've seen mixing boards, but what's happening here? It's this amazing mystery. But yeah, is there anything that's coming up, going on, something you want to plug? Where do you want to direct some eyes?
Well, I played piano on a vocal jazz album, the Aubrey Wilson Quartet. That was supposed to come out, mid-COVID. I'm not sure when that's coming out now, but keep your eyes and ears open. So myself and the bass player that Dan and I have played with for years, we are in this jazz quartet. And we did a lot of modern takes on old jazz standards. So a vocalist, bass, drummer, and myself on piano. So that should be coming out at some point. And other than that, I've just been, making music for no reason by myself and trying to do that a whole lot more. I've got my little studio here, and there's, guitars hanging and stuff. And, and so it's, I've been, putting little things up on SoundCloud, like, EDM beats and rock songs, and just
it's so fun.
Reason.
It's so much fun.
I think it's so important to just make music for no reason, especially if you have a little home studio, and if you don't figure it out, it's not that expensive and it's not that hard to do. Grab yourself Logic Pro and a little audio interface and just plug in and go.
Some of the simplest stuff is free.
Yeah.
So it's there's no excuse. Just do it. Just do it for you, for the children.
For the children. And even if you don't have a little keyboard, you can use your actual keyboard on your computer to type in little notes and see what happens.
Yeah.
And
it's really important.
A lot of those softwares come with entire banks. You can have strings, you can have whatever, and just create. And everybody seems to be, the people that didn't have little home studios seem to now, because there's nothing else to do. So, you can fly stuff off to friends, have them, put guitar over it or drums or something. And I've been looking to get into that a lot more too.
Yeah, that's been really cool to see, just people like throwing up a drum track and then like people stacking. I saw that video of that you guys were all doing where it was just like people adding on and on and on to this simple video.
With Tom on drums, our buddy from Come Together. And so he just did a funky beat, and then somebody did a bass line, somebody did whatever. I added some keys, and I had to learn how to do iMovie for that, and I mostly did it. But
there's a learning curve with editing and stuff, but once you get it, it's so much fun. Mm-hmm. I love doing it. Yeah. That being said, if anybody wants to edit like hours of footage,
you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, I think that about takes us to time. Cool. But if there's anything else you want to, like some final nuggets of wisdom that you want to drop about anything music, like an aha moment that you had that changed your life with music. Like
I've had a couple of those, mainly because I've had really good teachers. But I remember one time I asked Mike Malone, this wonderful teacher and trumpet player. I was kind of at a crossroads, and I was like, hey man, like, should I be focusing more on piano and more on composition? Because I don't want to like spread myself too thin. And he just looked at me and smiled, and he's like, that's the same thing. He's like, the better you get at your instrument, the better you're going to be at composition. So just keep plugging away and you'll be good. Also, another aha moment that I just think of that just aha'd me right now. I remember being in music school and always being really supportive of my peers, but there's the dark little gremlin in the back of everybody's mind that if you're competing with somebody in some way, you kind of hope they screw up a little bit so that maybe you'll get that gig or whatever. And I wouldn't let that, affect my decision making or the way I treated people or whatever, but it was still there. You still, when you're competitive with somebody or rivals with somebody, they say it's like, like swallowing poison and hoping somebody else dies. Yeah. It's just gonna mess with you. And I remember one day, I was watching somebody like this really great pianist that was also in the program. And I made the conscious choice to like genuinely root for him. And when he kicked ass, I was just so happy. And I felt like this weight off of me that like I didn't even realize I was carrying, and I never looked back. And so it's helped me so much, because now instead of having those weird kind of relationships with people where you're kind of competing, even if it's only like playfully, those relationships I find now turn into relationships where you're learning together and you're learning from each other and you can lift each other up. And whether you're a composer or a musician or whatever, I think that is so valuable, because there's enough room for us all. Right. Yeah. So that was definitely a big aha moment for me, choosing, and it's a choice, right? So
yeah, absolutely. The stone you carry is your choice, and you don't really have to carry one at all. You can just be happy for everybody and work hard, and it's only going to benefit you and your music. Yeah. So, well, you know what? I need to get hosed off because I'm dripping with sweat. But thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding music, and just, I like that it's just, I get to have conversations about this stuff with people, because these are the kind of things that we would cover maybe one or two of these things in a regular conversation, but being able to actually schedule people in for about an hour or so and have a concentrated, let's just go music. Yeah. I'm super looking forward to the rest of these conversations I'm going to get to have with people. This is an awesome thing that I get to do. So thank you so much for coming and
you're welcome.
I'll be sure to put up in
I'll do this tomorrow.
With the episode. Yeah. And there's no saying that I won't have you on again, and we'll have like a paywall. And then if you pay us $100, you get to hear the uncensored Alto Bile's after party stories. All right. Well, and with that, we bid you adieu. Thanks so much to Bruder, and thanks for all of you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Eyebrow power. If you want to learn more about any of the topics discussed on today's episode, or if you'd like to expand your horizons so you can make the most amount of impact with your music, please be sure to check us out at mfile.ca.